All right, folks, strap yourselves in, because this deep dive is a big one. This time we're going all the way back to Joe Rogan Experience, episode 2219 with Donald Trump. It's long, but it's a wild ride, trust me.
This one was after he was shot in the air.
Yeah, good times, that blood was some real stuff. But honestly, the real show started way before that. I mean, I remember how the media completely lost their minds over this interview.
You could almost say Trump is the OG generative AI.
Right, the man is a content machine. It's like he's always trying to come up with some crazy new prompt just to watch the world burn.
Someone should get him a copy of George Tome's Generative AI Professional Prompt Engineering Guide. Imagine what would happen.
Oh man, the internet would explode in a glorious mess of memes and hot takes. But let's get back to the interview. This thing goes everywhere. Lincoln's bed, pitch black Air Force One landings. It's a total roller coaster.
And you won't believe what he says about environmentalists. But before we get there, I think it's worth talking about how different Trump's life was before he became president.
Totally. It's like going from hanging out with Whoopi Goldberg to having the weight of the world on your shoulders. Talk about a reality check.
He even talks about how surreal it was to walk into the Lincoln bedroom for the first time as president, seeing the Gettysburg Address right there.
And that tiny picture of Tad Lincoln, man, that got me. But that's what makes this interview so interesting. It's like you get to see the human side of a guy who's usually portrayed as this larger-than-life figure.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, Trump had zero experience in politics. He was an outsider, a businessman, and that really shaped how he approached being president.
It's like he was trying to run the country like one of his businesses.
Exactly. Which maybe it wasn't such a bad thing.
Yeah, but try explaining that to those Washington insiders.
He talks about how tough it was to deal with the establishment, all those career politicians. He calls them survivors, guys like Mitch McConnell.
It's like trying to teach a bunch of old dogs new tricks. And then there's the media. Don't even get me started.
Yeah, his distrust of the media is a big theme throughout the interview. He talks about the Russia hoax, the Hunter Biden laptop suppression, just the constant negativity. It's clear he sees them as the enemy.
Which, let's be honest, they are. And you know what, I think that's part of the reason so many people love Trump. He's not afraid to call out the BS to fight back against the establishment.
It's definitely a different approach than what we're used to seeing from politicians.
It's like he's running his own anti-establishment AI, just dropping truth bombs left and right. The mainstream media never stood a chance. Joe and Trump basically destroyed them just by sitting there and talking.
I think you're right. They had no idea what hit them.
It's beautiful. But let's not forget, this interview isn't just about politics and media drama. There's some really fascinating stuff about global threats, too, like his views on nuclear warming versus climate change.
Right. He sees nuclear war as a much bigger threat than climate change.
He's not afraid to ruffle some feathers with that take. And come on, little rocket man, that's classic Trump.
It's definitely a more direct approach to diplomacy.
It's like he's running a whole new foreign policy model, one that throws out the rule book and goes straight for the kill. But you know what I really want to know?
What's that?
Where were Marshall and Carl? I mean, seriously, they were there for the last election. What happened? Did the AI overlords finally catch up to them?
Now, that's a good question. Maybe we'll find out in part 2. Speaking of things that could blow up any minute, let's move on to Trump's thoughts on windmills.
Oh, yeah. This is where things get good. You know how Silicon Valley is obsessed with green energy and saving the planet? Trump's not buying it. He goes on this epic rant about how windmills are gross, dystopian, basically an environmental graveyard.
He even tells this story about California rerouting water to the ocean just to save this tiny fish. He compares it to his focus on making America energy independent.
It's like he's saying, come on, people, we have bigger problems than some little fish. Let's drill, baby, drill. Classic Trump. He's not afraid to put America first, even if it makes the environmentalists mad.
It's definitely a different view than what you usually hear from the media, but honestly, sometimes those green energy solutions feel like they're coming from some AI that's more worried about algorithms than real-world problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to power the world with unicorn tears and rainbows. Meanwhile, Trump's over here saying, let's get real, we need energy, and we need it now.
Which brings us to another issue where Trump doesn't hold back election integrity.
Well, yeah. This is where things get really interesting. Remember all the drama after the 2020 election?
Yeah.
Well, Trump goes all in on his claims that the whole thing was rigged. He especially thinks mail-in ballots are just asking for fraud.
He points out things he sees as wrong with the system, like how you need an ID to buy cigarettes, but not to vote in an election that could change the country.
I mean, think about it. You need ID for everything these days, to get your prescriptions to fly on a plane, but not to vote. It does make you think.
Trump even says that normal, everyday Democrats agree with him on this. It's just the politicians who are against voter ID laws.
And that's what's so great about Trump. He knows how to connect with regular people. He's like the anti-AI politician, just cutting through the noise and saying what everyone's thinking.
It's definitely a powerful strategy.
For sure. And it's a big reason why he's so popular with his supporters. They see him as someone who's fighting for them, someone who gets it.
Speaking of fighting, let's talk about what Trump thinks of the Democrats. He doesn't exactly sugarcoat it, does he?
Not really. He's pretty harsh when he talks about his opponents, especially Kamala Harris. He calls her not a smart person. He even says the Democratic Party is corrupt and that they cheat to win elections.
Ouch. Tell us how you really feel. But, that's what people love about Trump. He's not afraid to say what he thinks, even if it's not politically correct. It's like he's messing with the whole political machine.
It's definitely disruptive. Whether it's good or bad for politics, well, that depends who you ask.
I guess it depends if you like your politics with a side of chaos.
Speaking of shaking things up, let's talk about one of Trump's more interesting cabinet picks, RFK Jr.
RFK Jr. Now there's a name that'll get people talking. He's definitely a controversial figure, especially with his views on vaccines.
Yeah, but Trump sees him as a guy who can change healthcare, someone who can stand up to big pharma.
Trump talks about this terrible chart he's seen. It shows that the U.S. has some of the worst health in the developed world, even though we spend more on healthcare than anyone else.
That's pretty bad. It makes you wonder, is big pharma really helping people? Or are they just making money?
It's a question worth asking, and RFK Jr. has been really outspoken against the pharmaceutical industry.
He's like that rogue AI programmer trying to fix the system and make things better.
That's an interesting way to put it. Whether you agree with how he does things, it's clear RFK Jr. is passionate about what he believes in.
And you know what? I respect that. Even if I don't agree with him on every alley dealing, that he's not afraid to challenge the way things are.
And finally, we get to the topic that always gets people excited, UFOs.
Oh, yeah. This is where things get really strange.
Yeah.
Trump starts talking about these conversations he's had with jet pilots who have seen strange things in the sky.
He even mentions declassifying UFO information.
What does he know? Did those pilots accidentally run into some crazy AI experiment? Or is something even weirder going on?
It's a total cliffhanger. And I'm sure people will be talking about this for a long time.
It's like Trump's dropping a bomb on everyone, making us rethink what's even possible.
It's the perfect ending to an interview that was full of surprises, contradictions, and a few moments that made us scratch our heads.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. We've talked about everything from Lincoln's bed to evil windmills to maybe even aliens.
It's like a journey through Trump's mind. A guy who does things his own way and keeps everyone guessing.
And just when you think you've figured him out, he throws you a curveball. It's like he's always changing, always adapting, generating new content to keep the world on its toes.
And that's what makes him so interesting, so unpredictable.
So Trump.
I still can't believe Marshall and Carl weren't there, though. What's the deal with that? So here we are, the final part of our deep dive into Joe Rogan and Donald Trump's epic conversation. We've covered a lot of ground Trump's businesses. His thoughts on everything from windmills to election fraud and even UFOs.
It's like we took a snapshot of Trump's brain, ran it through some crazy AI, and tried to figure out what it all means.
But you know what's interesting? Even with all the craziness, there's a pattern to how Trump thinks.
Yeah.
He approaches everything like it's a deal. Whether it's politics, business, or even aliens, he's always looking for the win.
He's always trying to figure out the best angle, the winning strategy. He's not afraid to push the limits, to break the rules.
And that's why people have such strong feelings about him. They either love his no-nonsense style, or they hate how blunt he can be.
He's like a human prompt engineer, always testing the boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. And the media, they're just the chatbots trying to keep up, spitting out the same old lines.
He knows exactly how to get their attention, even if it's negative. He's a master at controlling the story, at keeping himself in the spotlight.
It's like he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. He's always a few steps ahead.
Exactly. He's not like other politicians. He doesn't play by the same rules. He's something else entirely.
He's Trump. A total original. Love him or hate him, he's changed the game.
This interview with Joe Rogan gave us a rare look behind the scenes. We got to hear Trump talk about his experiences, his beliefs, what he thinks the future holds.
It was a crazy ride, for sure. Full of surprises, contradictions, moments where we were like, did he really just say that?
But it was also eye-opening. It showed us that even the most powerful people in the world are still human.
They have their own quirks, their own way of seeing things.
So what does all of this mean for you?
How do you feel about Trump after this deep dive?
Did it change your mind about him at all? Did it make you think differently?
And most importantly, where were Marshall and Carl? What were they up to while all this was going down?
Those are questions you'll have to answer for yourselves. The point of this wasn't to give you all the answers, but to give you the information you need to think for yourselves.
To have real conversations, to question everything, to never stop searching for the truth.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. Until next time, keep your minds open and your BS detectors on high alert.
And remember, the truth is out there. Somewhere.